Houston, we've had a problem.
Oh, got a fire in the cockpit.
NASA proudly shares the triumphs of the Apollo missions, but there's another side to this story, one that they don't want to share with the public. Spaceflight is dangerous. Reaching the stars is one thing, but making it back alive, that's where the real challenge begins. So which Apollo missions pushed the limits of survival, and what really happened when things didn't go according to plan? Let's unpack. On the morning of July 16, 1969, Buzz Aldrin prepared himself in a way few would ever know. In the quiet before the storm, he carefully sealed a small silver cup, a wafer of bread, and a handwritten Bible verse into a makeshift pouch. To the world, he was an astronaut, a man of equations and engineering. But in this private moment, he was something more, a human being, standing on the edge of the unknown. This wasn't just another mission. 2 years of grueling training, 4,000 engineers holding their breath, the hopes of a planet riding on their shoulders. And yet, as the Saturn V's engines roared to life, shaking the Earth beneath it, Aldrin had no idea just how close to disaster they would come. For 3 days they sailed through the black silence, Earth shrinking behind them, the moon growing larger ahead. Then, at the most critical moment, as the lunar module descended toward its target, the computer screamed in protest. Lights flashed, warnings blared. The machine was choking, overwhelmed, seconds from shutting down. Outside, the moon's surface rushed up to meet them. Not the smooth landing zone they had trained for, but a jagged wasteland of boulders and craters. Fuel dwindled to seconds. Dust from their own engines blinded them. And in that moment, Neil Armstrong did what no simulator could have prepared him for. He took control, steering manually through the chaos, guiding them to safety on instinct alone. They landed with less than 30 seconds of fuel remaining. But the real terror was yet to come. When Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon, he carried more than scientific instruments. He carried the weight of being second. History would remember Neil Armstrong's words, but Aldrin's quiet observation, magnificent desolation, held a deeper truth. The moon was beautiful. It was dead. And it wanted to keep them there. As they worked, a sudden transmission cut through the static. For one paralyzing instant, they feared the worst. Had something gone wrong? Were they being told they'd be left behind? Then, the voice of President Nixon crackled through the void, congratulating them. But the relief was short-lived. Because the most dangerous part of any mission isn't the landing. It's the journey home. Re-entry should have been routine. But space has a way of reminding humanity just how fragile we really are. As Apollo 11 hurtled back toward Earth, an unseen threat lurked in the darkness. One that could have shattered the capsule like an eggshell, one that NASA hadn't prepared for. The truth? They got lucky. And the most terrifying question of all, how many other close calls were kept secret? After surviving the fiery hell of re-entry, after enduring the crushing G-forces of their descent, after accomplishing what no human had ever done before, Buzz Aldrin found himself facing a danger he never expected. As the command module bobbed in the Pacific Ocean, a slow, creeping chill reached his feet. The hull had been compromised. The ocean was pouring in. In that surreal moment, a darkly humorous thought crossed his mind. After everything, after the moon, after the void of space, after cheating death a dozen times, would they really drown in the ocean like shipwrecked sailors? Luckily, the Navy was already racing toward them. A helicopter swooped low, winching the astronauts to safety. Buzz had survived. The mission was a triumph, but not every Apollo crew would be so fortunate. November 14th, 1969, Cape Canaveral, Florida. Commander Charles Pete Conrad stared out the window of the Kennedy Space Center, his stomach tightening. The sky was a roiling mass of storm clouds. Rain lashed against the glass. Winds howled across the launch pad. This wasn't just bad weather, it was a warning. In the crowd below stood President Richard Nixon. His presence was a silent command. The launch must go on. At 11:22 a.m., against all better judgment, the Saturn V rocket ignited, tearing into the storm-darkened sky. 36 seconds later, disaster. A blinding flash of white light engulfed the rocket. Inside the cockpit, warning lights erupted in a frenzy of panic. 16 seconds later, another strike, lightning. The electrical surge fried systems. The cockpit went dark, and suddenly the systems flickered back to life. The mission was saved, for now. Once the fuel supply for the rocket stage was exhausted, the detached part of the spacecraft was supposed to drift off into the void, far from harm. Except, it didn't. It wasn't until 2002, 3 decades later, that a group of amateur astronomers finally spotted it. A forgotten piece of Apollo 11, just drifting through space like cosmic litter, and a very real potential hazard for any missions that came after. But then came the next mission, Apollo 12, proved that even the smallest issues could spiral out of control. During their lunar landing, one of the engines started acting up, a mechanical hiccup, on the moon. But mechanical problems weren't the only strange thing about Apollo 12. The crew of Apollo 12 had smuggled a few cheeky items on board. Among them, Playboy centerfolds. Then, as if to humble him, the moon took its revenge. As Conrad took his first step onto the surface, he slipped, face first, right into history. Luckily, or maybe not, the moment wasn't broadcast live. Apollo 12 started to feel less like a moon mission and more like the beginning of a space thriller. So, while the astronauts continued their lunar joyride, Mission Control braced for a possible freefall from the sky. Fortunately, the parachutes behaved. The crew landed safely, but the mission still left scars. The color video camera? Dead, thanks to that broken antenna. For the scientists, it was a massive blow. They had banked on new visual data to further research, map the lunar surface, and justify the mission's staggering costs. Meanwhile, TV networks had already sold ad slots during the expected live broadcast of the first-ever color images from the moon. But with no footage to show, sponsors weren't happy, and NASA's funding, suddenly on thin ice. Still, as frustrating as Apollo 12 had been, it was nothing compared to what happened next. Enter Apollo 13. The mission had launched smoothly. The crew, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, were en route to the moon. Everything was running by the book. Finally, Aaron got a moment to breathe. He kicked back, let his guard down, and then his phone rang. An oxygen tank had burst inside the service module. The crew was alive, but they were losing air. A simple, deadly spark from an exposed wire inside an oxygen tank. One tank exploded. The second was damaged. But at that moment, no one knew the full story. Not even John. As a result, the moon landing was scrubbed. The mission now had one objective: survival. One wrong equation, and the crew could simply drift off into the black, lost forever in the vast silence of space. But inside Aquarius, things were far from okay. The tiny lunar module was designed for 2 people, the third astronaut. He was never supposed to be there, but now all 3 had to huddle inside, cramped, freezing, and running on borrowed time. Back on Earth, John, Aaron, and the NASA ground team hadn't slept much either. Eyes glued to monitors, hands scribbling calculations, all of them trying to rewrite the laws of chance mid-air, and somehow, they did. The Apollo 13 crew made it home alive. After Apollo 13, the command and service modules were redesigned to make them safer, stronger, and less prone to the kinds of catastrophes that nearly doomed that flight. 12 astronauts eventually walked on the moon. But that legacy was built on tragedy, and that tragedy started with the very first Apollo mission. Apollo 1st, January 27, 1967. Test pilot Gus Grissom, astronaut Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were all getting ready for Apollo 1, the United States' first manned mission in the Apollo program. America was racing to land on the moon. Everything seemed standard, until Gus noticed a faint smell of sulfur, usually a sign of a gas leak. NASA paused the countdown and flushed the cabin with pure oxygen. Then came the next red flag: comms failure. The crew couldn't clearly communicate with Mission Control, the launch complex, or even the admin building. Gus was frustrated. He was tired of the glitches. And unfortunately, so was the team monitoring the test. Many of them took a short break from their stations. Only one remained behind when tragedy struck. A spark, just one, ignited in the oxygen-rich cockpit. Within seconds, the inside of the spacecraft turned into an inferno. Desperate screams rang through the headset. Then, silence. All three astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were killed before they had a chance to escape. Ed had tried to open the hatch, but it was designed to open inward, not outward. With the intense pressure inside, it was impossible. Later analysis showed that the astronauts didn't burn to death, they were poisoned. Carbon monoxide and toxic gases filled the cabin before the fire could even consume them. The news devastated the country. The Apollo 1 fire was a wake-up call. NASA overhauled safety procedures. They replaced the hatch with one that opens outward. The 100% oxygen environment was scrapped in favor of a safer oxygen-nitrogen mix. And on the moon today, tucked into the lunar soil by the Apollo 11 crew, is a small metal disc, a tribute to the three men who never made it into space. It's been over 50 years since anyone last walked on the moon. Now NASA says it's preparing to go back, to send humans to the moon again by 2025 or 2026. The question is, how successful would this mission be? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.